Alright, welcome back to another episode for MC Airsoft. I'm Mark, and today we're going to be discussing ARs versus AKs. Now, why are we discussing this? It's an Airsoft channel, they're Airsoft guns, they got a lot of the same parts, does it really matter? Yes. Not as much as real steel. Obviously, there's some very big differences when it comes to real steel. And we might hit on some of those today, but I think there's a lot of people getting into the airsoft community. They're looking for their first gun or first in a range of guns, and they want to know, should they go with an AK, should they go with an AR? Maybe they don't have much experience with either. And so I think it's a important topic to discuss. In addition to that, I feel like every gun and or airsoft gun YouTube channel needs a AR versus AK video. This is going up in 2022. Maybe I'll do a follow-up video later on to discuss maybe my thoughts change over the years or what have you, but that's a topic for later. First thing we're going to hit on is price, because especially getting into airsoft, it's a pretty expensive hobby. It can be daunting to get your first gun, gear, charger, batteries, safety equipment, maybe a secondary, plus if you're already paying for going to a local field, you've got gas and admission fee, things like that. It can get expensive. One thing I will say is price for price, dollar for dollar. I'm gonna have to give it to the AKs on this one, okay? If you're going with a budget line AK, you can get SEMAs all the way down to, if you're getting them on sale, 80, 90 bucks. But you're going to see a lot of them within that $100 to $150 price range. And from my experience, they're keeping up with ARs in the up to $250 price range. Are they going to be better than them? Maybe not. But especially when you're getting into the $200 to $250 range, but they'll keep up with them. Whereas a lot of lower budget ARs, one, it's hard to find them for around that $100 mark, especially now with the increasing price of airsoft guns. It's hard to find a lot of them in that $100 to $150 mark. And do you really want those? From my experience, not generally. Now, I picked up this one used for $100. I think right now they're selling for between $100 and $150. This is the anniversary AK. I think lots of places have them. I know at least E-Bike does, and that's the one I price checked. So, whereas like I said, $100 to $150. This one, obviously I've done my own modifications to it externally, but this one retails for around $190. So, however, I think that one does really outperform the AK. So, price, gotta give it to the AKs. The budget line ones just seem to be better at the same price point. So that's something to point out. Another thing for anyone who might have issues with it, first of all, both of the magazines in both of these have no followers, no springs. They can't hold BBs. Well, and you can pour them in there, but that's about it. Another thing of note is the batteries are out of both of them. So that is, just wanted to get that out of the way, right? So as I handle them and, fiddle with them, bear that in mind. You don't need to leave it down in the comments or anything. So the first thing is going to be weight. Now, for those of you who lift, I don't. For those of you who lift, maybe this isn't a big deal for you, but AKs, generally speaking, are going to be heavier than ARs, especially because most people want metal receivers, metal dust covers, metal barrels, metal wherever they can get it. This one in particular has a polymer stock, polymer grip, polymer rails, and even without the attachments, which they pretty much have the same attachments on them, this is probably about half the weight of the AK. Now, this one also has polymer receivers, metal buffer tube, metal handguard. It's essentially flipped other than the barrel. This has a polymer buttstock. This has a metal buffer tube, metal barrel, plastic rail, metal receiver, plastic receiver. But in the same categories of metal versus metal and polymer versus polymer, you're going to find, generally speaking, that AKs are heavier than ARs. Even before attachments, you could probably lighten down with maybe some faux wood or some thinner handguards. You can definitely get some polymer handguards for ARs, but generally speaking, for the same components, same material for the components, so a metal receiver versus a metal receiver, polymer rail versus polymer rail, generally speaking, ARs are going to be lighter. And why is that important? Well, maybe you're not in the best shape, maybe you're just starting off your fitness journey or what have you, whatever you want to call it. You're not used to the weight of having to carry around something all day for an event or just throughout the day at your local pickup games. The AR is going to be a lot easier to carry, so I do recommend that to newer players, especially if they're not in the best shape. At our local pickup games, we have kids, waist-high kids running around with ARs, no real issue. If I were to give them that AK, they're probably going to have an issue. Especially when you're getting into mil sims, ARs are lighter, and that might really matter by the end of a 3-day event or such. So that's something to consider. Size. Depending on what you're doing, obviously a full metal M16A4 with proper rails, proper ACOG, everything like that is going to outweigh a cut down 74 U, right, with maybe no buttstock, real short barrel, that kind of thing, and all polymer or metal or whatever. But the size is going to vary greatly between different models. But if you take a generic AK versus M4, which is what a lot of people tend to debate, although I would put the AK more in the M16 category rather than M4, because it is a rifle rather than, in my opinion, rather than the M16 or the M4 being a carbine, right? So, but one thing to know is you can see the length difference, especially if you don't have a folding stock or if you have the stock out, okay? There's a big length difference there. This is a much longer gun, right? Now, obviously, you can get the folding stock, but something to note of that, whether you have no stock, folding stock, whatever the case is, you're still probably going to be holding it out for the most part to get that good grip on it, get that red dot or iron sights or whatever you're running up to eye level. If you're punching it out there in front of you, my stock isn't touching my shoulder right now. So unless you're planning on running it real tight in, right? Obviously you can do this, you can go around corners, you can do all that kind of stuff with that, right? I would argue that the stock doesn't matter that much. And in addition to that, with an M4 platform or an AR platform, right? I can short stock it, I can go over, I can go under, okay? And I can still punch it out if I need to, or even I can shoot from here at relatively close ranges because the hop up is going to send them off to one direction. But I can also put it over my shoulder like this. Now, would you do that with a real gun? Maybe not, but for airsoft, these have no recoil. Even the recoil system, whatever's, have no recoil. Gas guns don't really have recoil. I'd put them in like the 22 category. But yeah, your mileage may vary. In addition to that, I can shorten the stock, which actually puts these at pretty much the same length, right, as the AK with the stock collapse. Now that's an AK-47. This is a short barreled kind of M4. It's got an 11.5-inch barrel versus the barrel on this, which is probably closer to 15 or so. I haven't really measured it with the booster flash hider, whatever you want to call it. It's a bit longer. It's probably closer to 16. But that's something to consider, right? Is based on your battery configuration, maybe I can just shrink the stock all the way down, right? Again, these have no batteries in them, but a LiPo takes up less room, right? So I can get real tight into it. Now, do I want to shoot on like that all day? No, it's uncomfortable. But so is holding an AK without a stock, at least to me. Okay. So size of it, okay. I'm gonna give it to M4s because if you're not playing mil sims, things like that, you can obviously cut the barrel down to a couple inches, take off the stock, you know, do all those things to make it AR pistols. I'm not talking ATF AR pistols. I'm talking, you know, cut down to the size of a pistol ARs, right? Because we don't need the buffer tubes. So size of it, I'm gonna give it to the ARs. Okay. Now that being said, I do need to put on the flash hider again on this one, but this is also an AR, and it's longer than both of them. In fact, it's longer than the AK with a stock extension. This is a big gun. Again, it's fairly lightweight, but it's a big gun. But this is built out for a DMR role. Don't judge me on the flash hider too harshly. It came off during a recent game and I just haven't put it back on. So, size. Now, ergonomics, right? Now, I personally find the AK very unergonomic, right? Especially with these folding stocks, and especially with the more old school style rails. I hate the feel of them. I always have. I've shot real ones. I've shot plenty of AK or airsoft ones. I've always just hated the feel of them. That's me. I suggest if you're worried about ergonomics, go down to your local field, see if they have one for rent or someone else has one that you can just pick up and feel with their permission, of course. But I don't really have a good place where I'm comfortable holding this, especially because the point of balance is weird and I want to hold it here, but then I can mess up the magazine fitment, right? Which of course depends on your AK and depends on your magazines, but holding it from here doesn't really work. With a gas gun, my thumb wants to go right behind that charging handle. If there's recoil, if there's gas, I'm going to hit that. Now I'm left-handed, so right-handed, that's not a huge issue. But the thing, one of the things with CQB especially, but airsoft in general, is as I'm coming around a corner, going around a piece of cover, whatever that might be, if it's more opportune as a left-hander, right, If I'm going around a piece of cover, I might switch over to my right hand. If I'm a right-handed shooter, I might switch over to my left hand, and that's just something to keep in mind, that the bolt charging handle is right where you're going to want to put your thumb. Now, if we're moving forward, instinctually coming from ARs and also wanting to get a good supported platform, I want to reach out there. Now on this one, I can grab my flashlight, right? Because if it's a sturdy enough mount on a real one, you could theoretically do it. But this is Airsoft. But I want to reach out way in front. This doesn't really let me do that. Now, if I swap my flashlight to the other side, I can pop out a couple more inches, but it's still not where I want it. I'm 6 foot, I got relatively long arms, and I want to be out in front, or I want to be in tight, right, depending on what I'm doing. Neither one of those is a good option. The foregrips they come with, yeah, you can get a foregrip. Most people can't C-clamp an AK. It's got a much wider rail and it's uncomfortable. So most people aren't running C-clamps. Maybe if you replace the rails. Foregrips, they're an option. I don't like them because you don't have a lot of stability this way. You have more stability this way. Okay, so not a huge fan. If you run a tricep grip, right, counter supination, I think it's called, whatever the case is, it's a little more comfortable, but most people don't shoot like that. And yes, you can sniper cradle these, right, if you really wanted to, and that's actually fairly comfortable. Even with a bad shoulder, I can hold that for a while. So that's something to keep in mind. Front hand placement, it's wonky, don't like it. Now again, you can replace the rails, but you shouldn't have to replace the rails, right, in my opinion. So, and generally end up spending more doing that anyway, if they even fit. So moving back, I actually really do like magazine reloads, right, okay? Especially if it's a real AK, gas AK, whatever, where you actually have to work the bolt. Being a left-handed shooter, I can come in, reload, and it's really easy to work the bolt, and I'm back on target. Now for right-handed shooters, again, Airsoft reload, same thing, no big deal, nice and ergonomic. I like to chicken wing while I'm doing this so I can keep the rifle somewhat on target still, and I can support the weight of it. If you're doing a gas gun or whatever where you have to work the bolt, you have to figure out either coming from underneath. I like turning it and going over the top. That's my personal preference, but that is something to consider if you're getting a gas-driven or whatever AK that requires bolt manipulation. Moving back from there, trigger, fine. I have no issue with the trigger. The grip, okay, Airsoft companies need to stop putting ergonomic grips on things because they're not ergonomic. You want to spread your fingers apart, and if you have a smaller hand or if you have a bigger hand, they just don't fit anyone, other than, I'm guessing, the designer, right? They're garbage. I hate it. That's going to get replaced here soon, or at least grinded down. Moving back, now this is obviously a folding stock, which is not ergonomic. Now, first of all, you can't dig in. So if you want to present a lower profile, or you want to dig in because that's what you're used to, maybe you're coming over from ARs, you can't. Because if I dig in, okay, I'm staring at this back plate. Now, can I shoot from there? Sure, why not? It's Airsoft, but I can't really use my sights. I definitely can't use this red dot, which is a low mount version of this red dot, which I have a review on the channel. Same red dot, but this one doesn't have the taller mount on it. because frankly AKs are already tall enough. So I have to get a chin weld, okay, if I want a weld on it, or my head just kind of hovers behind it. Now, one thing of note is that it's airsoft. Whatever you expose is what they're going to shoot at. So the more you expose of your head over or around a target, or sorry, barricade or cover, the more you expose of your head, the more you're going to get shot in the head. And with an AR, I can really get down into it and get more protection for my face. If you wear a face mask and those shield things and high-speed goggle or the big goggles and a helmet, maybe you don't care, but yeah. And that I will say, if you are wearing a face mask or one of those shields or something of that nature, that maybe you want to go with an AK, because it's going to give you more standoff distance to get behind the sight and wear those bulkier face protectors, okay? The stock, it's fine, it's a stock. Other than that, you can obviously build up a cheek pad there if you wanted to, but that's up to you. Most AK stocks are even more dramatic than this in their downward taper from what I've seen, but your mileage may vary. You can obviously get the buffer tube ones and things like that, so you can put all the same stocks as your ARs on there. That's fine. But yeah, I'm just not a fan of the AK. Maybe it's ergonomically, I think it's awful. Maybe that's because I've shot ARs for the most part, both in airsoft, military use, and just going to the range. But that's my personal preference versus ARs. Now, one thing I will say, not really hitting on aftermarket parts, but one thing I will say is even the basic A2 style grips are fine for ARs. I did obviously replace mine with a 416 style grip. That's a note on aftermarket parts. There's a lot more external aftermarket parts for ARs than AKs, and you're more likely to find something that fits you ergonomically with this. Now, one thing is to note as well, is the buttstock. While I'm fiddling with it, I'll mention it. Most ARs on the market nowadays will come with an adjustable buttstock, which is better. AKs will come a lot of them with folding buttstock. Not a lot of them are adjustable. So if you want that good length of pull for it to fit your body, ARs definitely have an advantage there, unless you get a buffer tube or something that adjusts for your AK. Now, handguard, nice part about the handguards is, one, there's a lot of them. Two, most of them come with these nice little thin M-lock rails. Now, why do you want a thin M-lock rail versus the Picatinny's? One, you're never going to use all of that. Two, cuts down on weight. Three, I can get a much better purchase on this, right? If I can only wrap come from the bottom, I have a lot harder time gripping this rail. Okay, so if I can get a nice purchase, right? I don't have big hands. I generally wear medium gloves, right? But I can get a full purchase with this. And even on my real steel guns with the M-lock, same thing, nice good purchase there. So if you are running a recoil system for whatever reason, you can minimize that recoil on these, but it's just going to make it easier to hold. I can literally just walk around holding the rails and it's fine. Two, the balance point on most ARs is going to be around that magwell, which is where you want it, because you can just hold it and it's going to fit in your hands nicely, right? You can come back here, support the weight, or you can move around and it's good. Another thing with the rail system though is you can get super long ones with a long barrel, like my Mark 12 has a much longer rail system than this does and much longer barrel, or you can get nice stubby ones. So if you're picking up an AR, you're much more likely to find one that fits your body and how you want to hold the gun. Now, mag release, not as big of a fan with this one. Yes, you can get different mag releases and different things, but here's the thing, it's designed for right-handed shooter, which is fine. I can take my trigger finger, drop that mag, exchange that mag. If I am running a bolt gun, I can rack it, right? Or I can come across here, rack it, and I can get to firing again. That's great. As a left-handed shooter, as a right-handed shooter, you can also work that bolt release with your thumb. You can smack it on the side, whatever you do. Okay. If I'm a left-handed shooter, it's different, and I don't like that. Okay. So I can come back and I can hit a mag release with my thumb, right? I like to chicken wing. That's just how I operate. Okay. I can hit that mag release with my thumb. That's great. I can come up and hit the bolt release with my index finger. If you have smaller hands, maybe not. But even if you don't, okay, you can pop off and smack it, right? Great. And I can still work the charging handle if I need to, if it's that type of airsoft gun, right? Or real steel. Okay, the problem is that's a completely different way of operating. I actually, for me, because I don't train right-handed reloads as much, what I'll generally do is if I'm coming around right-handed and I need to reload, I'll generally pop it back, reload, okay, and pop it over. Because I don't train it, it's not as natural for me to reload here. Now, if there's a lull in the gunfight, whatever you want to call it, yes, pop, that's fairly easy, okay. But if it's a more high-speed situation, whatever, it's going to be harder. Okay, so from here, I get good retention of my magazine. That's great. From here, if I'm mistimed, I might drop that magazine, right? Actually, this doesn't want to drop free, but I might drop that magazine. But I have to get positive retention and then switch magazines. Okay, cool. Moving back, unless you have an ambidextrous safety, which the techs that I've talked to recommend flipping both sides at the same time to save stress on it. I've never had a left-handed AR or an ambidextrous AR, so I'm used to rocking that switch on the left side, okay, which is fine because two things. One, as soon as they yell game on or as soon as I'm walking on the field, that thing comes off safe. It goes on to semi. So I don't have to think about it anymore. That first target that presents itself, I don't have to, oh crap, it's on safe, and then maybe I lost the target, right? It's already there, okay? It's already ready to go, okay? But if I needed to turn that off, okay, I generally use my left hand, my index finger, or the knuckle of my index finger, depending on how stiff it is. Nice part is that if I start at that first knuckle there, okay, and it is stiff, my main knuckle is just going to follow through. I'm going to turn it on and go, okay. Is it the most ergonomic way of doing it? No, but it works for me. Now, for right-handed shooters, you obviously got your, okay, you got your thumb there, so I can rotate through. Turning back on safe is a little hard. I can rotate through with it on the trigger if I really needed to. If I want to turn it full auto from here, I have to really work at it because that's not what I'm used to. Now, that is something of note, transitioning back to the AK real quick. Something of note is how the safety selector works, okay? All the way down in the third notch is semi, the middle notch is full auto, top notch is safe. Now, I have heard whether it's true or not, that the reason is because the Russians wanted people who are freaking out, adrenaline's high, whatever. If they slam it, now they're on semi and they're not going to waste a bunch of ammo. Don't know how true that is. What I will say is that if you're a left-handed shooter, that's real easy. Okay, real easy to get there to the mag release. If I'm a right-handed shooter and I don't have one of those fancy paddle things like this gun doesn't, I have to come off and go, okay? Or I have to come underneath and go, okay? Neither one is great. So that's another good point for the AR, right? Again, it's a different for either hand, which I don't like, but so is that for safety. Sling points, great sling points. You can have 30 different sling points on this thing. Actually, one in each rail as well, so maybe 100 different rail points. These are obviously harder to mount, or sling points. These are harder to mount sling points. I'm going to be removing this one because I don't need it, putting one on the other side someday, because I am a left-handed shooter. That's on the right side. That's going to be an issue for me, especially because I mostly run 1 points. Other than that, pistol grip, I replaced this one, but even the A2 is comfortable. Okay. So ergonomics, I'm going to give it to the ARs because generally they're more ergonomic out of the package, and also they're more ergonomic in general. So I'm going to end it there, then we will come back with a part 2.